You know, when we see a problem in our community, our first instinct is usually to ask, okay, what can we do about this? But what if there's a better, more important question to ask first? What if it's not just what we do, but how we do it? Because as it turns out, choosing the right tool for the job can literally mean the difference between helping and making things worse. I mean, we've all seen this happen, right? Some well-meaning group wants to fix a problem. They've got all the best intentions, but their big plan just fizzles out. Or even worse, it backfires and creates a whole new set of problems. They wanted to do good, but the outcome was all wrong. So what's going on there? Well, the source material we're digging into today offers a really fascinating idea. It suggests that success or failure in civic life often boils down to one simple thing. Are you using the right tool for the task at hand? It's all about knowing when you need to persuade versus when you need to compel, or realizing when a simple helping hand is way more effective than a brand new rule. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what's called the wrong tool problem. Then we're going to unpack the three main tools in our civic toolkit. That's law, culture, and service. And finally, we'll walk through a really practical guide for figuring out which tool to use in any given situation. All right, let's dive right into what happens when we get this choice wrong. See, when you use the wrong tool, especially if you reach for a sledgehammer when you just needed a screwdriver, it doesn't just fail to solve the problem, it can actually do real damage. It can chip away at trust, it can undermine people's dignity, and it can just make a community feel, well, broken. And the fallout is very real. First off, the original problem just doesn't go away. Then people start pushing back, not because they disagree with the goal, but because they hate the way it's being done. And pretty soon, the whole community starts to feel less like it's being cared for and more like it's being controlled. That is a terrible feeling. Okay, so let's get to the toolkit. It's really simple, but incredibly powerful. You've got three main options. First, you have law, which compels people and sets the bare minimum standards. Then there's culture, which persuades us and shapes our everyday habits. And finally, you have service, which supports people by meeting needs directly. Three tools, three very different ways of getting things done. So let's talk about the first one, law. Think of this as the heaviest, most powerful tool in the box. It is absolutely essential in certain moments, but its real job is actually pretty narrow. Its main purpose is just to set the floor, the absolute minimum standard for how we behave. This quote just nails it. A law can stop someone from stealing, for sure, but it can't make them generous. It can't force them to be a good neighbor or a kind person. Law is designed to stop the bad stuff, not to create the good stuff. That's a huge distinction. So this means you have to use law like a scalpel, not a wrecking ball. It's the right move only when there's clear and direct harm being done to people, when fundamental rights are on the line, when justice demands enforcement, or when basic public order is falling apart. In those specific cases, compulsion is exactly what you need. Now, on to our second tool, culture. This one is all about what we do when nobody's forcing us to do anything. You know, when no one's watching. It's about our shared habits, our norms, the things we just do. This is the tool of persuasion, not punishment. It's about inspiration, not legislation. I love this quote because it shows how law and culture are connected. Think about it. When a community has a really strong, healthy culture where people just voluntarily look out for each other, you don't need a million laws. But when that culture starts to fray, you start hearing calls for more rules and more regulations to fill that gap. So when do you reach for this tool? Well, you use culture when you're trying to change deep-seated habits, when you need to win hearts and minds, not just get people to comply, is for when the example you set is way more powerful than any rule you could ever write. Culture is for playing the long game. And that brings us to our third and final tool, service. And you know, in a lot of ways, this is the most fundamental one of all. It's just about meeting a need directly, without forcing anyone to do anything. It's all about invitation and voluntary action, and that's exactly what makes it so powerful. This really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? Before we jump to making new rules or trying to change a whole culture, maybe the very first question we should ask is simply, hey, who around here just needs some help? Service builds trust from the ground up because it starts with relationships, not regulations. It doesn't box people in, it invites them in. So, service is the right call when the problem isn't a lack of rules, it's a lack of resources. It's absolutely crucial when you want to preserve someone's dignity, and it's for when you want to build a community where people help each other because they want to, not because they have to. Okay, so we've got our three tools on the table: law, culture, and service. Now for the million-dollar question: how do we actually choose the right one? How do we take this idea and apply it to real life? The key principle here is one simple word: restraint. Real wisdom in civic life, what the source calls prudence, isn't about showing how much power you have. It's about resisting that very human temptation to reach for the heaviest tool, the law, as your first move. It's about starting with the lightest touch possible. So here's a super simple decision tree to guide you. You ask these questions in order. Number 1, is there direct harm happening that needs to be stopped right now? If yes, law might be the answer. If no, move on. Number 2, is this issue really about our shared habits and values? If so, then you need to focus on culture. And if the answer to both is no, then number 3, are people just lacking support or resources? Well, then the answer is clearly service. And here's the big takeaway, spelled out. The single most common mistake we make is jumping straight to law to fix a problem that's actually rooted in culture or a simple lack of support. The wise or prudent approach is to flip that upside down. Start by asking if service can help. If not, then work on building a healthier culture. And only as a last resort, use the heavy tool of law when it is absolutely necessary. So that brings us right back to that key idea, prudence. And in this context, it has a really straightforward definition. Prudence is simply the wisdom to choose the right tool for the job. It's about being effective, not just forceful. It's wisdom in action. Let's leave it with this powerful thought. The health and the freedom of our communities don't depend on us having the strongest tools, like more laws and more power. No, they depend on everyday citizens having the wisdom to know when to compel, when to persuade, and, maybe most important of all, when to simply serve one another. So, as we wrap up, here's something to think about. When you see a problem in your own neighborhood or community, what's your gut reaction? Which tool do you naturally reach for first? Law, culture, or service? And maybe more importantly, why? Because understanding our own default setting is the first step to choosing our tools a whole lot more wisely.